Hi, welcome to a news episode of Sports Talk Central. I'm your host, Adima Mood, with my normal co-host, Hunter. And today we're going to be talking some Virginia Tech football athletics. We're going to be talking some Ravens Steelers, rest of the NFL in Week 1, and talk about a couple of contract extensions that happened and a couple of ones that didn't happen. So let's start off with Virginia Tech athletics. Virginia Tech football right now, they're 1-1. They beat Old Dominion but lost to Purdue. What were your thoughts from these first two games?
I think the first thing that comes to mind, the offensive line is definitely a big work in progress. There's a lot of young freshmen and sophomores on that line. I think the biggest thing is you're not going to have a Christian Darrisaw type player every year. I mean, those players just don't grow on trees. But VT just needs to, I hate using this phrase, you got to get some dogs for that line. You got to go to schools like Phoebus. You got to go to Stonebridge and all these other places. I don't also think they didn't work the portal enough for offensive linemen like they should have. I think that's a big problem with the team right now. We can say play calling. I think I'm a little underwhelmed by Tyler Bowen. I don't think he's a fraud like Brad Cornelson was pretty quickly, but I do think he's leaving a little bit to be desired. Beating Old Dominion was good, but ODU is probably going to be one of the worst teams in the FBS, I think, this year. Purdue, it was nice to come back. You had that good second quarter, but the offense disappeared again, frankly, because the quarterback is not that good. I think we've honestly seen enough from Grant Wells at this point, Indeed, where he's kind of there. Last year, I gave him a little bit of a pass because, okay, you didn't have some of the weapons. Okay, you go out in the transfer portal, you get Jalen Lane, you get Ali Jennings, and I think the early word at this point, I was listening to a space last night, and Dwight Vick, who played for the program when his cousin Michael was here, was saying that it looks like a 6 to 8 week injury. That's really unfortunate because this was his senior year. But you get those weapons, at least for a game and a half. Well, not even a game and a half, at least for Jennings. You have Tootin in the backfield, Malachi Thomas, but it's not going to do you any good if the quarterback is not that good. And I think we've seen enough of Grant Wells at this point that he just kind of is who he is. And that's why I think they need to get rid of this two quarterback system. And you have a redshirt sophomore there. And I know they didn't score on that final drive, but he looked good. I saw what I needed to see in those 5 to 7 plays, especially when he lowered his shoulder and he didn't go out of bounds. And I'm like, okay, this guy actually feels like he's ready to play. He had a couple good throws. Play calling let him down a little bit late there when they got into Purdue territory. But throw him to the Wolves, see what you have. It's only 2 games in. You still have some weapons there. Hopefully Jennings is able to come back at some point later in the season, but they need to see what they have in drones. I don't want this to be like a 2019 situation again, indeed, where you have, remember, the Ryan Willis, Hendon Hooker thing, where you see one guy is better than the other, but you're not playing him as much. I think Drones is better than Grant Wells, and I think he needs to be given a shot to prove that to the coaching staff. Defensively, Chris Marv, I'm kind of indifferent on. It's only really been a couple of games, but, I think some of the run fits need a little bit of improvement. The secondary could also improve a bit as well. It's still a young team. This is still a team that's very far away. I would love to be able to win these close games. I think that's coming. But, again, like this game yesterday, I think maybe it hurts a little bit more because it was such a winnable game for VT. You come back from 17-0 down, you tie it, you start the ball with you start with the ball in the second half, but you don't do anything offensively. Your defense is keeping you in the game until it's gassed later on in the fourth quarter. It's annoying that they gave up that touchdown, sure, but the offense just didn't do anything. So there's still quite, I think, at least a few problems. Offensive coordinators, not as good as I thought, at least so far, but I'm willing to give him time if a quarterback comes up like Drones. Offensive line is a huge issue for this team. There's just not enough good players on that line. And now without Jennings and hopefully Jalen Lane is okay, it's going to be tough. If they can win these next 2 games, I think they can make a bowl. But if they drop these next 2 heading into Pitt and Florida State, you might be looking at a 1-5 start, and it's another season down the drain.
Yeah, I think that's you kind of raised a good point. I think obviously the offensive coordinator, he now has talent, so he has less excuses to work with. Um, in the first game, Grant Wells was not making mistakes. If you noticed in the first one, he was not making mistakes, and he did a good job. Allie Jennings had a good debut. Jalen Lane had a good debut. Felton had made a few good catches here and there. Tootin kept falling forward. That was a note I had from the first game. He just kept falling forward. He kind of looks like a little bit like with Gus Edwards, like Gus Edwards from the Ravens. He would just keep falling forward, and I like that. The first game, the offensive line did protect a decent job, no sacks. The second game, not so much, and I think it really was a difference of two games. I think the first game, you saw what this offense could do, and they missed out on some big plays in that game. And in the second game, Grant Wells gets two interceptions. That first interception, that was very clearly designed to be a one read play because if you notice, he as soon as he faked the handoff, he immediately threw it to that one guy. So whether that's on Grant Wells, whether that's on the receiver, whether that's on probably it's more on the offensive coordinator, but I understand what they were doing, and it's tough. I mean, stuff like the second game, the announcers were saying it. Purdue was getting gashed in their first game with the middle passes in the middle, and they were clearly trying to do so, but they kept dropping those passes every once in a while. So obviously, and not just Allie Jennings being hurt for the next 6 to 8 weeks, but also Nick Gallo. He's out for the year as well. So it's now down to Gosnell. So it is really tough. I think that drones is probably the better option, honestly, at some point. But at the end of the day, I don't know if drones or Grant Wells are going to be that long-term option. They feel more like bridge, like especially Grant Wells feels more like a bridge quarterback. He definitely, to me, he kind of has like Ryan Fitzpatrick type tendencies, or like guys that would like turnover happy, like big.
He's like Ryan Willis from a VT standpoint. I feel like it's like a mini version of Ryan Willis.
Yeah, and I do think because they are doing the two quarterback system, I do think Brent Pry is going to be quicker to moving on from the quarterback than Fuente is, because Fuente was very stubborn in the way he was doing it. Right. So yeah, I mean that's kind of the main thing. And you're right. Like Rutgers, that's gonna be the big. If they continue to crap the bed, if they crap the bed against Rutgers, I'll be worried. But if they play well, let's see what happens. But yeah, I think this is Holloway. He's gonna have to step up. Lofton's gonna have to step up. Gosnell's going to have to step up. So with Allie Jennings out, I do feel more confident in this team because I think that this team has better perimeter weapons than the previous year's team. But yeah, Tyler Bowen, it's going to be really interesting. As for Chris Marv, I mean, let's see what happens. Because you got to remember, Brent Pry is a defensive-minded guy. So if Tyler Bowen and Chris Marv are inconsistent, who do you think it depends on who you think he's going to fire first, Marv or Bowen. And I feel like he'll fire. I think he likes Chris Marv. He likes Chris Marv, but I think if they had to get rid of one after the season, I think it'll be Chris Marv before Tyler Bowen. But I don't think he wants to get rid of either. That's my point. But yeah.
I mean, and they also they got to run the ball better. I mean, you talk all about this offense, right? Oh yeah, we want to be a ground and pound team. We want to run to set up the pass. They didn't even have 20 rushing yards yesterday, and I get it. Purdue, they have some great players in their front seven. They went to the Big Ten championship game last year, but this is not that same Purdue team. You also were not even able to run the ball against Old Dominion, and that is probably the easiest game on your schedule this year. Maybe, well, I'll say, okay, ODU I think is an easier game than UVA, but it's probably not by much. Still, Boston College is up there too. But you couldn't even run the ball against them. There needs to be a serious, what's the word I'm looking for? Just a revamp of the running game and the process for it. Offensive line has to be better setting up the holes because every time they run the ball, whether it's Tootin or Malachi Thomas, they have a guy draped all over them in a millisecond. That has to change.
Right. So let's move on to the next topic, which is Ravens and Steelers. Ravens beat the Texans 25 to 9, and Steelers lose. I'll talk about the Ravens second. What do you think of the Steelers game?
Yeah, just a dreadful performance all around. I think in all three phases, there's no somehow, there's the saying, oh, you can blame usually just one person for a loss. No, no, no. It's this one. You can blame Matt Canada. You can blame Kenny Pickett, especially. The defense was awful. Mike Tomlin did not have a good game. And the special team stunk outside of Chris Paul as well, but he didn't really have to do anything. I think I'll just start with Kenny Pickett. Everything I saw from the second half of last season to the preseason, which I know everyone takes with a grain of salt, to now, I felt like I was watching a different quarterback. I felt like I was watching someone who had never played the position before. He looked spooked back there. He looked like he was second guessing every decision he was making. His reads were really bad. His pocket presence was really bad. His misfires really bad through a couple of awful interceptions. I don't really know what this game was for him, and I get it. The 49ers are an insanely good team. I think you agree with me that they're probably going to be at least back in the NFC Championship game this year or close to it. They are one of the two best teams.
The Eagles. They're the better teams. Best teams.
I think those are the two best teams in the conference, in my opinion, and I think you would agree with that as well. So, again, I understand from that perspective, but everything we saw, again, from the preseason, the second half of last season, just totally different. And teams are starting to adjust. I want to see what he is after 25 to 30 games because he's going to have to adjust back to teams adjusting to him. Today, epic fail. I think everyone had an epic fail today, but especially him. He had a ton of misfires, was awful throughout. He can't play like that if this team wants to win. I think overall this loss just shows how far the Steelers still have to go if they want to contend. Everyone keeps saying it, oh, yeah, the Steelers are that sleeper team. Oh, yeah, blah, 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 this, blah, 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 that. And you know what? I drank a little bit of that Kool-Aid heading into the year. But after this game, I'm not, one of these weird yinzers who are trying to overreact. I will say the gap between a team like the 49ers, even though they have Brock Purdy as their quarterback, and he played really good today, I'll say that. Give credit to him. He was a rock. The gap between a contender like the 49ers and a team like the Steelers, it is so substantial it's not even funny. Steelers, they're probably still at least a year away from actually contending like that. This is a good roster, but this just shows how much further they have to go. The defense, they got carved up. They played way too much zone against Brandon Ayuk. He was carving them up all game. Christian McCaffrey carved them up. A couple really bad run fits, especially from Levi Wallace that I did not like. The secondary in general was really bad. I don't know why they weren't playing Joey Porter Jr. at all. They just drafted him. Maybe they just want to, conserve his reps a little bit. Don't really get it. That was weird to me. The play calling from Matt Canada left a lot to be desired. He's still calling these second and long runs. He's still calling weird screenplays. He's still not understanding red zone offensive concepts. There was a situation in the third quarter. They're down 27-7 at this time, and they're trying to make it a 2-score game again. 3rd and 4, 4th and 4, back-to-back plays. You're running all of your concepts into the end zone when you need 4 yards. That's not competent play calling. You're setting your players up for failure. And again, he's just not a good coordinator. Not the biggest problem today, but he was a big one yet again. Presley Harvin, punting wise, he was schooled so badly it wasn't even funny. And honestly, the coaching staff in general, I felt like Mike Tomlin was just, I'm not going to say what I was going to say there. I'll just say that I thought he was badly outcoached, schooled, whatever you want to call it. Very unacceptable. You can't start the season out like that, especially at home. Seeing all the 49ers fans take over Acrisure Stadium is also really embarrassing, in my opinion. It's rare when you see that, I think, at a Steelers home game a date when the opposing fan base comes in and almost takes it over 50-50. And that's exactly what happened today. So a lot to work on, a lot to go over on the film. It's one game. I'd rather have a game like this now than at the end of the season. But I want to see what they worked on, heading into that next week's game against the Browns, which is huge because they just blow out the Bengals. For some reason, the Bengals just can never beat the Browns. But they have a lot of things to work on. Hey, at least TJ Watt showed up.
Yeah, so I think the good news is, if there is any good news, this was an NFC game. This was an NFC team, not an AFC team. So when it comes to tiebreakers, so it's like you don't want to have these. You don't necessarily want to lose against division teams. And then if it's not
like losing to the Bills or the Chiefs,
or team in the AFC. So it's a team against the NFC. So if you had to take a loss, this is probably one of the better ones. I didn't know that they didn't play uh, Joy Porter Jr. so much. They didn't play him at all. I was a little surprised by that.
It's
But yeah, I
weird.
mean, yeah. Well, also, I mean, Pickett didn't play well. A lot of the quarterbacks didn't play well, and right now teams aren't playing their starters in the preseason. The first 4 weeks are typically the preseason for. So that all right. For the Ravens, first let me start off with bad news. Harbaugh confirmed J.K. Dobbins torn Achilles. He's out for the
Oh,
year.
that sucks.
Yeah, so he didn't say anything about Stanley's ankle. He should be good. Linderbaum I know left the game. He should be good. So, but yeah, it's gonna suck, especially with Dobbins is due for a new contract. So like the ACL, recovering from the ACL, now the
He
Achilles. I
didn't
mean,
play that much last year, did he? D?
second half of last season,
Second half.
he
Okay.
came back. He came back, then had another surgery to fix up a minor error, and then because he held in for most of training camp for a new contract. So it's gonna suck. It sucks that he hasn't getting a new contract. Marcus Williams came out of the game, but he should be good to go. Mark Andrews wasn't playing, but that was more for precaution. The big notes: offensive line for the Ravens was struggling in the first quarter and in the fourth quarter as well. They were really sloppy with the penalties. In the first half, they had 9 penalties for 82 yards, so they had a few that were extended drives. Second half, the O line was able to get more push. The running game definitely was. You saw some bigger runs out of
You hit the
Edwards.
Scoriami today. You got the Scoriami.
Yep.
Nice job.
Um,
We'll keep going. Sorry.
about with Hill and Edwards. Hill had 2 touchdowns. He's gonna play a big part, especially with his J.K. Dobbins news. I expect Melvin Gordon to get activated to the 53-man roster for the next few games, and then Keaton Mitchell when he's ready to go. So they do have depth at running back. Uh, Zay Flowers looks as advertised. He was the receiver that showed up the most. He definitely does. He definitely feels like you could use him in multiple ways. As for the Texans, uh, C.J. Stroud and C.J. Stroud looked polished. He looked like he had some nice drives. Um, Obviously, offensive line didn't protect him as much in the first quarter, and later in the game, the Ravens were able to get some sacks. And C.J. Stroud was able to get out of a few plays here and there. Um, Robert Woods looks like a pretty good safety blanket for C.J. Stroud. So if you're going for fantasy, that might be a guy that you might want to have Robert Woods on your team, at least on the bench, because he looked pretty good. Tank Dell looked decent. Nico Collins looked decent, but seems like Robert Woods and is going to be the guy to look at. Really, that's really what the game was. They won the game. That was good. It was an AFC game. That's fine. It sucks with Dobbins. The offense definitely looked very vanilla. I do wonder how much of that is due to easing Lamar into these next 4 weeks. How much of this is having the fact that they're playing Cincinnati next week, so they didn't want to show too much on tape, so then they could.
That'll be a pissed off Bengals team.
Yeah, no, and then but also like against the Bengals, like Mike McDonald coached up a pretty good scheme against the Bengals the last couple of years. And when we talk about the rest of the NFL, obviously the Bengals are going to be a topic. But yeah, no, I mean it's going to be, and then obviously they got the Steelers and they got the Browns and they got the Colts. So if they can get 3-2, 4-1, if they can get to like a 4-1 record in the next first 5 games, then they're in really good shape, especially with all of them being in conference. But yeah, that's kind of my main notes there. Uh, Roquan Smith had 15 tackles, which is good. Ray Lewis had 14 3 times in his career in Week 1 games. So Roquan did slightly better. Patrick Queen had a sack. Uh, the secondary wasn't too bad. I mean, they gave up some plays, but it wasn't like they were getting carved by C.J. Stroud. So it's good. They played well. It's a gritty win. It's a win that you're happy with, but you're not really happy with the injuries. You hope that guys come back healthy. So nothing too much to talk about there, and you really covered most of the Steelers. I'll start with the rest of the NFL for me. Yeah, let's talk about. Okay, so we're gonna talk Bengals. I'll put that last, but Stroud and Richardson looked good. Bryce Young had a couple of interceptions with
I
the
was going to
Panthers.
ask you, were you impressed by CJ Stroud today? And I know
Yeah,
it was
I was.
against a good defense, though,
Yeah,
but
I was impressed by him.
okay.
He's in a good situation where the Texans aren't expected to win, but he didn't look rattled. Like that's the thing. Like that's a
Okay.
good thing. He didn't look rattled. He's gonna make rookie mistakes every once in a while, and part of it is due to the bad offensive line. But he seems to be more well prepared, and obviously Ohio State quarterbacks don't tend to translate well to the NFL. So he might be one of the better ones there. So I'm impressed with him. Like I said, Richardson looked polished. Bryce Young had 2 interceptions. Obviously, Steelers couldn't. One thing I was going to say was I just remembered Christian McCaffrey. They could not stop Christian McCaffrey at all. Um,
Couple
also,
injuries. Deontay Johnson got hurt. Cam Hayward. Some Marvin Leal got hurt too. Just hopefully Johnson he looked like it was a mini non-contact one. Might be a few weeks. Cam Hayward has a groin. Johnson had the hamstring. Just two brutal injuries though. It was just a awful day. And then to end the game, Javon Hargrave, former Steeler, gets the final sack. So just stick the knife in even more. Why don't you?
yeah. So yeah, and also Jaguars look like the favorite for the AFC South. They start off the game pretty well. A few other ones, and then the other one for the first set of games, the Falcons. This is a team I'm going to watch for. Desmond
Yeah.
Ridder struggled. He struggled. This was a team that if they had a quarterback, they could have been better. He struggled, and the run game kind of supported him. Bijan Robinson had a nice touchdown run. Uh, Aguilar had a good touchdown. Aguilar had a good play. Here's the other thing, though. Kyle Pitts and Drake London combined for only 2 catches and 44 yards today. Those two, only 2 catches, and no, they were from Kyle Pitts. So free Kyle Pitts from Atlanta because this dude was hyped coming
Yeah.
out of the draft. He has not done anything. He's not a
Right.
top 5, top 6 tight end. I thought, oh, they're gonna go bring in Arthur Smith, who was from Tennessee, and he was able to use the tight ends well there. It's not. They're not going to him. Drake London. They're not going to him. So it is. It is just a thing. Before we talk about the Bengals, did you have any other notes from any
Looked
other
like
games?
the Saints won. They beat the Titans. I was got close at the end though. I believe Williams was the one. He fumbled it on that final clinching play, but was able to fall on the ball. The NFC South is so interesting this year. You also did. I don't know if you saw the Bucks won. They beat the Vikings today. Baker Mayfield really struggled out of the gate. Was able to turn it around. That division is going to be hilarious, I think, this year because I think any of those 4 teams can win it. Like that's the thing. I know the Panthers. Bryce Young looked okay today and they lost, but still, I can still see them winning that division just because the NFC South is not going to be good. That caught my eye a little bit. Jacksonville, a little bit of a slow start, but they're able to come back and win in Indianapolis. A couple of games going on right now. It looks like Jimmy Garoppolo just got taken off the field. It looked like there was maybe for a concussion situation there. Jordan Love's first game for the Packers. I believe this is the first game that the Packers that they don't have Rodgers or Favre since 91, 90, 91, 92.
Somewhere in that range. Yeah,
It's in that early 90s range. And it just feels very weird to say, I think, at this point. But there's still some good games on for the afternoon. Eagles, Patriots will be a good one. But I think there's a lot of bad football play during the 1:00 games. And, we can discuss this Browns-Bengals one now if you want. The Browns have the Bengals number. I don't know if you saw the comments Jamar Chase made earlier this week where he said, Cleveland is Cleveland, and basically called them the elves. Buddy, did you learn anything? Did you learn anything from what Juju Smith-Schuster did? No, you did not. And I understand.
Also,
the Browns have been the Browns for
Ohio, in Ohio, and so they're both in the same.
Yeah,
they're both in the same state.
I don't know. It was a weird comment. Like, you're just asking this game to go poorly, and sure enough, it did. Joe Burrow looked very rusty, I think, but it's also just the first game. Deshaun Watson, I don't really think looked that good either. And I think he had probably one of the worst interceptions I've ever seen, but The Browns were overall just a better team. They've had the Bengals number. They've won 9 of the last 11 games against the Bengals. Very weird series considering how good the Bengals have gotten the past couple of years. But I'm sure the Bengals will be fine. Joe Burrow was just a bit rusty today. Did you see anything else from that game?
I didn't see that game too much. I was just noticing how Burrow only threw for 82 yards in that game, and he was not very good. Yeah, you could say rust, but we all know how good Joe Burrow is. He should have done better. So I don't know if he was celebrating too much after signing his contract, which we will talk about later, but this is a big loss for Cincinnati as well because also, yeah, they go 0-1, but they start off this week against the Browns, next week against the Ravens. If the Bengals lose next week, they're 0-2 in the division. They are already 0-2.
Right. That's a big hole. And you're 0-2 overall. That's a tough hole to climb out of.
And conference as well. So it's sort of like the best you can do is the best you can do is win. If that happens, the best you can do is win 75% of your games in your division. And if you lose one more, it just continues to drop. So I mean, they are definitely in a tough place. And I get it. Burrow had the calf thing, but the Bengals have to wait until they slow down. They have to really try to come back from this because they could fall back really quick. So
Right.
it was funny seeing people clown on the Bengals. I mean, people were clowning on the rate like Lamar because he didn't have a great game. Look, he had 2 fumbles. He had one where he had the ball in one hand. The ball was just knocked out. Luckily, Ricard jumped on the ball, but he didn't do a good job of.
Also had a bad interception, right, Adit, in the red zone?
Yeah, I would say he had a bad interception. Yeah. Granted, there's someone. I think someone was grabbing the receiver's Flowers' arm, maybe a little bit on that one. But yeah, he probably shouldn't have thrown it there. But yeah, Burrow didn't have a first game post contract, so let's see what happens. If they continue to play like this in September, then the alarm bells definitely have to go off for them. But yeah, so let's move on to the contract extensions. Joe Burrow signs a 5-year, $275 million deal, 219 guaranteed. It's pretty funny that the Browns pay Watson 230 fully guaranteed, thinking it's going to dismantle other teams. It'll disrupt the market, but no one is getting more than 230 million, and they're just proving to be the outliers. And then Nick Bosa ends up signing for about 35 million a year. What were your thoughts on these contracts?
I wish Nick Bosa didn't sign the contract this week. I wish he waited until the week after. But I mean, he's one of the best defensive players in the league. Very well deserved contract. Joe Burrow, I mean, that's just where quarterback contracts are going. And Adit, what's Patrick Mahomes going to get now when that deal is restructured? I mean, he's probably going to break the bank there. And then you still have who's after Burrow now for quarterbacks? Lawrence. Okay, Trevor Lawrence. I was about to say Herbert, but he got his contract. That's my fault.
Yeah, Herbert got his contract.
Yeah, Lawrence is next. Mahomes, I mean, even though he got his money, he's probably going to renegotiate or have it restructured so to have maybe a higher cap.
And Allen as well. Josh Allen, Dak Prescott,
right?
Trevor Lawrence. All those guys, yeah.
And it's funny that Joe Burrow signs that contract just a few days ago, and then he comes out and has this performance. Just bad karma at that one. But I think, when they're both on their games, two of the best at their positions, and I think they're well compensated for it.
Yeah, no, and I think for first thing is with Nick Bosa, you're talking about Patrick Mahomes. I mean, with Nick Bosa, why would Micah Parsons? If Parsons,
right.
If Nick Bosa's getting, and I feel like the biggest losers are the Cowboys. Not that I'm sad about that, but the biggest losers are the Cowboys. Because if Nick Bosa signs for $35 million, remember we were hearing about how Micah Parsons was trying to be more of a pass rusher to get more money a year ago. So Nick Bosa's going to get, and that's Parsons could get 36 million. With his he could get somewhere in that range, and with Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott's gonna be due for a new contract soon. And do you really trust Trey Lance, to be your starting quarterback?
No,
that's where
I don't.
And so it's going to be really. These are record-setting contracts. Um, Good for them for securing their future. It's going to be really interesting to see some of these guys. I mean, thank goodness you guys got T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith signed long
Whew,
term before,
thankfully. Yeah.
and then it's like you look at this offseason. Thank goodness the Eagles signed Jalen Hurts to the contract they did, and the Ravens signed Lamar to the contract they did because 160 guaranteed, or once was it 165 guaranteed for Jalen Hurts, and then it's like here's the thing: you start off this offseason 165 million guaranteed for Jalen Hurts. You start the season 219 million guaranteed for Joe Burrow. That's a massive,
Just
massive number.
the increase is just crazy.
And now you're talking about what 55, we're 53, 54, 55 million a year. Like
Yep.
wait, like you're right. Like wait until Mahomes re-ups his contract. I mean, because here's the thing: Travis Kelce, he's past his second contract. If he wants to stick around, if he gets what 18, 19, that's fine. They could just do that. Now, they probably do, the Chiefs, judging by what happened on Thursday, they probably should invest a little bit more in a receiver to work with Travis Kelce. But let's see what happens there. And then let's talk about the last one, which is Justin Jefferson, Mike Evans don't get extensions. Now, for me, one reason I want to bring one of the stories why these two correlate is Joe Burrow signs his contract. I'm assuming just Jamar Chase is going to get an extension,
Yeah.
but Tyler
It's not
Boyd, T. Higgins,
nope.
they are not. I don't think one of those two or both of those guys aren't getting money. Aren't getting their money. That means with Justin Jefferson not getting his contract extension now, Mike Evans on the last year of his deal, this receiver we might see one of the bigger receiver markets in the next couple of years with some of these guys getting in line for new contracts. And I believe Tyreek Hill's contract, he's in year 2 of his deal, so
I think
he
you're
might
right.
be
Yeah.
looking for a new contract. So, what were your thoughts on Justin Jefferson and Mike Evans and not getting their contracts in?
I mean, it was close. I mean, they took it down to the wire. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens after this season. I think they'll probably just get franchise tagged, though. At least Jefferson will. Adidas, you're not just going to let that guy walk, like with how I think he's the best receiver in football.
I think it's tied to the future Cousins. I think if you let Cousins walk, you have money freed up for Justin Jefferson.
Yes. I think either way, this is probably Cousins' last year in Minnesota. He's collecting such a massive paycheck there as it is. But if you have that money freed up for next year, you can give a lot of that to Justin Jefferson, who deserves it. Mike Evans, he's a bit older now, and I know Tampa Bay's not really contending, but I still think they're going to try to find a way to keep him just because of how productive he still is, even though he's in his early 30s now. I mean, I don't see them, at least in my opinion, I don't see them leaving their respective teams, at least right now.
And I think Mike Evans was the first draft pick of their GM they have over there, so I can't imagine that they'll do it.
He's been there a long time.
Yeah. So like I said, this is going to be an interesting wide receiver market. I know Ravens fans are, when the whole Mike Evans stuff was happening, it's like, oh, he was with Todd Monk. It's like, no, you got it. They're going to pay Odell Beckham before they pay Mike Evans, before they go after Mike Evans. They're going to pay Rashad Bateman before they go after Mike Evans. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, let's see. I mean, if the 49ers continue to rely on a quarterback, on a rookie quarterback or a guy on a rookie contract, maybe the 49ers decide to go after, especially if Brandon, like, what about the 49ers or the Rams as a potential landing spot for Mike Evans?
Well, makes sense, especially the 49ers. I mean, you put Mike Evans on there and you have Brandon Ayuk and you have George Kittle and you have all those other weapons, Christian CMC and all those guys. Whoo, that's going to be a tough team to beat. I don't even know if the Eagles can beat them, though. That would be a fun game, though.
Yeah, but do you think that like they could go after him, especially if they go keep it with the rookie quarterback or something like that, and they just use the money?
I mean, they could. It just, do they have the draft capital to do it after spending a lot of draft capital last year to get CMC and some of these other guys? I think that's going to be the big question, in my
Yeah, and
opinion.
also
But Mike Evans will be interesting. He'll be an interesting trade target by the deadline if the Bucks are out of it. But they got the win today, so they're feeling pretty good.
Raiders could also be interesting for Mike Evans because if Garoppolo's not part of their future, then they have money not freed up spent on the quarterback. And
Mike Evans and Devontae Adams, really?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, because if you remove Hunter Renfrow out of the equation, you don't have Darren Waller anymore. Josh Jacobs, I don't know if he signs with them. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But who knows? Who knows about what Vegas is? Oh, by the way, it's not like. Hold on a second. Who do you think? It's not like Vegas has a minority owner who knows Mike Evans pretty well. That can't be true. That can't be true. Is that possibly true? I believe that's true, right?
Sources can confirm that.
Yeah, so maybe Brady puts in a good word. Like that is actually a sneaky spot because I didn't even think about it because Brady is
I mean, if they're trying to contend, yeah, but like, are they fully trying? I mean, I guess they signed Jimmy Garoppolo, so I think they're probably low key trying to contend.
Yeah, well, again, it depends. It's just a hypothetical, but yeah, we're gonna end the show on that note. On that note. Next week we are gonna be. Let's have a discussion more on baseball next week. Playoff races are heating up right now. Braves just clinched the playoff spot right now, so they're the first team doing it. I believe the first team in the American League will be the Baltimore Orioles. Right now, their match number is 17 to clinch the division and home field advantage, which is basically a combination of 17 of Orioles wins, Braves losses. Apparently, if the Orioles get to 95 wins, they are secured a playoff spot. So their magic number right now is 5. Right now it might be 4 because it was weird because the idea was all these wild card teams are playing each other, that the magic number, like the Orioles could get in 95, like at one point I think on Friday it was like 96 wins. There's no way the Orioles can't get into the playoffs. Apparently now it's 95. Who knows? Maybe it goes down to 94, 93, but it looks like they're going to be the next team. Houston Astros are now in the lead in the AL West. So it's going to be interesting, and we're going to talk. I think we can talk more about that next week as the races heat up.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll do a lot of baseball next week, and I'm sure we'll do VT football and Ravens Steelers too.
Yep.